Hello guys, it's David with the London recap for Friday. So as usual, I'll go over EU and the DAX and how I was seeing price action this morning. So we will start with EU on the daily, right? So swing is bullish, strong swing low, current high is swing range, internal is bullish. We had this bullish internal break structure here. So this is our strong internal low, right? So we've had this super bullish week, right? Strong bullish candles pretty much every day this week. So possible, of course, that we could see a pullback into here. We know we will come back into this area at some stage, but we obviously don't know when. As things stand, there's absolutely no sign of bearish intent on the daily whatsoever, right? We don't have a chalk, we don't have a flip, and we don't even have a bearish daily candle closure, right? There's absolutely nothing there to signal that we're going to see that pullback. So more than valid to just keep buying in the premium in this range, right? Don't fall into the trap of always anticipating pullbacks, right? There's some circumstances like when you have very clear trend and price action, you have a lot of bullish momentum that this can just keep continuing. So that is the daily. If you look at the 4 hour, so 4 hour swing is bullish, strong swing low, current high is swing range, internal is bullish. This is the most recent internal break structure, right? So as with the daily, swinging internal bullish. You can see we're trading in the premium of the range here. Very possible we could see a pullback at least into this range here, or potentially down to here. But again, we've nothing at all to suggest that that is imminent, right? And you can see we're currently just ranging sideways here. So what we could see maybe next week is maybe come up, take these highs, and then maybe we'll see the pullback. But as things stand, no sign of bearish intent in the 4 hour whatsoever. So more than valid to keep buying. And when you have this sort of bullish momentum, you don't really want to be fading that too aggressively on the M15. Ideally you want to see some sort of a shift on the 4 hour. So that is the 4 hour, and then if you look at the M15, so we'll take this back to where we were sitting coming into session, right? So M15 swing bullish, strong swing low, weak swing high. Internal is bullish, so this is our strong internal low, this is our weak internal high. Aggressive push up and a nice corrective pullback. So every possibility the price does continue higher from here and take out this high. So again, just looking for buys, right? No real interest in sells. The higher time frames are heavily bullish. The M15 is looking bullish as well. We've come off this demand at the extreme. Just really want to try and time longs, right? When they line up. Now, there was this demand here that was just below market, right? Personally, that's not a POI that I would be considering trading from, because again, yes, we mitigated the extreme, but what did this low achieve? What did this POI achieve? Well, it led to a shock, right? So you can see we took out the inside bar there, but then following the shock, we pushed higher, and then we have now broken lower. So once we sort of took out that low, in my opinion, it was very likely that this low was going to get swept. So personally, I would not be interested in looking for buys from that POI, just because in my opinion it's a very low probability POI, right? So the ideal scenario here for me would have been a sweep of this low, and then like your bullish M15 order flow shift and get involved with buys that way. So yeah, as I said, personally I was not interested in buys here. I would have just been waiting for more development, right? Now if we drop down to our execution time frame, you can see, look at the M5 here, right? So we had, you can see the POI here, you can see we had the bullish shock. So again, there is an M5 LC2A here, and as you can see, pull back in, mitigate the POI, and then straight away go on side, and price absolutely seals to TP. Now obviously everyone's bullish, right? So buys are always going to be higher probability. It's just, in my opinion, that's a very low probability POI, so not one that I would personally be looking to trade from. Just because it only led to a shock. There was a bearish shock before coming back into the POI, which for me would sort of negate the bullish shock in this case, just given how the POI formed, but it played out. Then if you go to M2, you can see the CE would have been a no tag, right? We had the bullish shock, but then you can see we just had a very aggressive move up, pretty much vertical. There was no meaningful pullback, so the CE would have been a no tag. Now obviously at this point we had more development on the M15. We had our bullish M15 shock following the sweep, so obviously following that there, we have a lot more confirmation to be looking for buys, right? So would have had that range drawn on and just looking for, following this shock, once price sort of closes up here, just looking for price to pull back in here and get involved. But unfortunately, as you can see, we rocketed away, and there was no high probability demand mitigation. No interest in sales, as I said, based on higher time frames, based on the M15. So no interest in looking for sales around here on it. And yeah, unfortunately, the bias played out, but there was just no high probability demand mitigation in my opinion. So yeah, nothing really doing there. There was that potential LC2A from the low probability demand, not personally a trade that I would consider, but each to their own. If it fits your plan, then go for it. Now, if we look at the DAX, now the DAX is a bit of an interesting one this morning because I passed on a valid trade that probably was a bit of a mistake on my behalf. Not one that I'm going to beat myself up over too much, but it was probably still a mistake nonetheless. So daily is bullish, strong swing low, weak swing high, right? Internal shifted bearish, but as we know, we've mitigated the high probability weekly demand, right? So very possible that this internal break structure only happened to mitigate the weekly demand, and then you can see we had this bullish M15 or bullish daily order flow shift, right? We pulled back, we mitigated the high of the flip. So as I was saying yesterday, I'll just take this back to, as I was saying yesterday, all I was really anticipating was price taking out this high. I just wanted to play that move, right? I'm aware from a weekly perspective, it's very possible that high could go, but I'm just looking to play this daily order flow, right? Where if the pullback, break, pull back into the demand, just looking to take out this high and then reevaluate things, right? So that is pretty much, looking very, very bullish. Yeah, and the daily, when the daily and the weekly are so clean, generally that's when you get the nice price action on the lower time frames. And as I said, given how clean the weekly and the daily are, I probably should have been a bit more aggressive this morning. So that's where the mistake probably came in. Now if you look at the 4 hour, so 4 hour swing was bullish, strong swing low, weak swing high. We pulled back, we mitigated the range, mitigated supply, nice reaction, but then we broke higher, right? So if you take this back to where we were sitting coming into session, I believe we're sort of sitting around here, right? So obviously based on the daily, based on the 4 hour, wanted to target this week high. Now the absolute perfect setup would have been a pullback into this flip zone and then get involved from there. That would have been the A1 setup. But the markets don't care about what we want to see, right? So there's every possibility that price would just run the high from here, right? So every possibility that could have just went from here, and then after we've printed another break structure, then maybe next week we see the pullback into here, and then we see the continuation of the swing trend. So this is where it's very important, just with the DAX, with how we trade it, right, to be aware of the different possibilities, aware of the the high probability areas, but you have to be prepared to just sort of go with the structure, right? If you're always sort of waiting for a pullback, you're going to be waiting a long time, right? So when everything's aligned in line with that higher time frame bias, we have weak high to target, that's where you just want to be aggressive with looking for buys. So yeah, again, crystal clear bearish daily bias or 4 hour or bullish 4 hour bias, sorry. Ideally looking for pullback into here, but equally happy to just follow the momentum to target this high. So that was the 4 hour bias. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. So if we look at the M15 now, so just go back here. So M15 swing is bullish, strong swing low, weak swing high. But again, I understand I'm playing the mitigation of the higher time frame demand, right? So all I'm really worried about in the M15 is the most recent structure, right? Because I just want to follow this bullish structure to target this high. So as you can see here on the M15, internal is bullish. This was my internal range, right? So this was my strong internal low, this is my weak internal high. How this was forming coming into session, you can see we had bullish order flow, right? So that's all very well and good. Favouring buys, we had a lot of liquidity there. That was not the most convincing push up. So the ideal scenario, as I said, was for price to come down into the 4 hour demand. So if price came down in here with a lot, ideally swept all this liquidity around market open and then look to get involved from buys from there. This is the sort of scenario where I would consider just getting in on the M15 OFS, right? Because it's such a high probability 4 hour demand, right? It's such that if we come back in here, you're getting in a great value to potentially target this high. So this is a sort of scenario where I would potentially use an M15 OFS. But as I said on the 4 hour, you know, the markets don't really care about what we want to see, right? So it's entirely possible that we just keep going from here. So yeah, just waiting to see, do we come down in here, or do we get sort of, you know, the bullish structure forming and to just follow it. And this is where I mean, if you're just sitting waiting on here, then you can miss good trades within here. You know, yes, price can come down here. That would be the absolute ideal scenario, but we can just go from here. So we play it on, see how we go, and then bang. At session open, we printed another internal break structure, and we also printed a swing break structure, right? So this was not ideal because, again, I ideally wanted to be targeting this liquidity, right? Because again, this is the daily and the 4 hour high as well as the M15 swing high, right? So potentially my daily and 4 hour objective is complete, right? And you know, we could see a pullback from here. Now, as I always say, do not anticipate pullbacks on the DAX, right? So for that reason, as this was setting up, I had this POI drawn on. Again, meets all my criteria, right? It's a flip zone because clearly we reacted to some supply to the left here. It took out the internal break structure, took out the swing break structure, so it directly led to the 2 breaks structure, right? So a pullback in here and along would have been nice. So just waiting to see, does this get mitigated? So very, very clear plan, just waiting on this here. Because again, yes, price could come the whole way back down to the 4 hour demand, but equally, if we're going to keep pushing higher, it's likely going to do so from here. So we'll play it on, pullback. This is exactly what I like to see, because what this is what I would class, it's what I call a near miss, right? Price tried to pull back down and mitigate the range, but it just missed. And that's going to be, you can tell that wick in the M15 is going to be your M5 lid, right? So that's where we now likely have lid for this POI to look for an entry. So again, still just waiting on this POI. Again, push higher with more momentum. Still just waiting on here. Absolutely nothing doing at this point. Just still waiting to see, do we come in here to look for longs. Now, the next candle is, I believe, London Open. So as you'll see, we had this action, right? Now, I saw this huge bearish engulfing candle in the M15, right? I looked left and there was some unmitigated M15 supply from before, right? So we did react to something. Again, wasn't aware of this before the fact, right? It's just when I saw this sort of candle forming, when I saw the bearish reaction, I just sort of went looking to see if there was anything clear. So the other, you know, the key thing here is have this POI. I was interested in this POI. I was looking for an entry from it, but just when I saw this reaction here, bearing in mind that on the 4 hour we had taken, you know, we'd effectively completed our 4 hour and daily objective, right, which was just to take this high. So as I always said, don't anticipate pullbacks in the DAX. So again, this is why I think it was probably being a bit too conservative, because I was anticipating a pullback. But just when I saw that candle closure, yeah, I just hesitated on it. It is, I would actually classify it as a mistake on my behalf. Now, this trade that I'm going to show you will probably, definitely would have been a break even for me anyway, so it didn't actually lose anything today. But I just think, you know, I also encourage people that actually don't overcomplicate things. Higher time frame directional bias, which, as I said, weekly, daily, 4 hour, all point to the upside, right? Then how do we capitalize on that there? We want the M15 order flow aligned with a higher time frame bias, which you can see here, we were clearly bullish. I want a non-mitigated POI, which again, you can see we have a very clear unmitigated POI. Price came back, missed it, and then came back into it. And then I need an M5 LCM, and again, you can see there's a wick there in the M15. That's going to be M5 liquidity, right? So this meets every criteria. I chose to pass on it just because I basically talked myself out of the trade when I saw this bearish candle, and the fact that we had sort of taken the 4 hour on the daily high that I was sort of targeting. So again, just hesitated here, which, to be honest, I think was being too conservative this morning. I think it was a mistake. Now, if you look at the M5, you can see, come in, there's the very clear M5 lid, which, as I said, was visible on the M15 on it. First entry would have been here, but as you can see, that wouldn't have been tagged because we formed this inside bar. Then we came down, set the low, and we had a nice strong bullish candle closure there, right? And as you can see, came up, swapped the high, not looking great at this point. At this point, I was sort of liking my decision to pass on the trade because obviously it looked, after we swapped this high, as though we could see that deeper pullback. But then we just started to grind higher. This would have been a break even for me anyway because it didn't quite hit the 2-hour TP, and that's trading view TP, right? You know, when you're executing these in MT5 with stop orders, like, you're always going to have a bit of slippage, so you're going to have to push your, you know, TP slightly further. You know, your TP is probably going to be like around 2.1, 2.2, or so. It wouldn't have hit TP for me. So yeah, one of them, it is one of them I'm going to journal it this weekend that was just too conservative. I sort of broke my own rule and I anticipated that pullback just because I saw the bearish engulfing candle. So yeah, personally, I would classify that as probably a mistake. Look, it's not a mistake that I'm going to beat myself up over too much, because again, when I allow myself 10 to 20% discretion, right? The way I frame my trading is I have very simple setup, right? Of which this meets the criteria. I've already went through that. Higher time frame bias, M15 order flow, unmitigated POI, M5 LCM, right? They're the main things I look for. And that all those criteria were met. So this was a valid trade for me. I just chose to pass on it because of basically the higher time frame. That we had completed the higher time frame objective, which again I think was a mistake for me. So, you know, the way I frame it is I need to be hitting 80 or 90% of these trades over the course of the year, just to let the edge play out, right? You know, if I start passing on more trades, if I start, say, passing on 30 or 40% of the trades, then that's how you get stuck doing the break even dance, right? Because you're just not letting your edge play out. It needs to be 80, 90%. And today, I think I just got inside my own head a bit. I passed on this. I'm not going to beat myself up too much because discretion's a double-edged sword. If price had tagged me in here and broke lower, I'd be thinking, oh, that's great, I passed on that loss because we had that bearish engulf in the M15, and, you know, it was the right decision. And then when price started trading up around here, you're thinking, I'm an idiot. I made a big mistake. So, you know, it's that double-edged sword, and depending on the outcome, you sort of feel like a genius or an idiot. But the key thing and the thing you can control is that you're executing the majority of those trades that fit your plan. And that is the most important thing. Like, taking the odd aggressive loss or missing the occasional win, you know, when you use that little bit of discretion, is not a problem, as long as you are taking 80 or 90% of the trades and letting the edge play out. And, you know, yeah, as I say, I probably was being a bit too conservative here. I think I just talked myself out of it because of an M15 candlestick. Even though everything was bullish. So yeah, probably a mistake on my behalf, so not really too happy with that, but it is what it is. And as I said, it probably would have been in fact, it definitely would have been a break even for me. If we just jump back up to the M15 here, you can see we had another M15 demand here, so, you know, you can just follow the bullish order flow here. As you know, you're entering sort of slightly far on the run now. You know, this was the trade to take. I wouldn't be a huge fan of sort of just aggressively following the order flow up here. We had swept pretty significant high as well, which again could be a catalyst for a pullback, but don't anticipate pullbacks in the DAX. You see, you have to sort of constantly ingrain that into your head. So again, it's valid to keep buying from here, just not a massive fan of it personally. And there was an entry, you can see it's an LC1 again, so you would have been tagged in there, and yeah, price broke lower, so would have been a loss there. And then, you know, I'm pretty sure if I was in this trade, I'm pretty sure I would have trailed it to probably break even after price had, you know, come back down, tested the entry and moved ahead. I probably would have trailed to break even there, and would have been stopped for break even. So yeah, and today it didn't cost me, you know, at the end of the day, I didn't take a trade, I ended up break even for the day. If I had taken the trade, I would have ended up break even for the day. But, you know, you just have to be aware that if you're going to use discretion, you know, it can work for you and it can work against you. And, you know, missing a winner can be every bit as painful as, you know, passing on the loser. So yeah, it's important to remember that as well. And yeah, the key thing, my motto this year was literally just let the edge play out. Keep it simple, DAX during London, simple systematic framework, and just hit the majority of the trades and don't overthink it. And yeah, it's been working pretty well for me. So yeah, that was it. Probably would classify it as a mistake for me, not one I'm going to beat myself up about too much, but I probably should have hit that trade, to be honest. I just sort of talked myself out of it at the last minute, because I anticipated a pullback, which is the cardinal sin on the DAX, as you'll know. Because again, on another day, you just pull back in there and you could be sailing towards the all-time highs by the end of New York session. So you never really know with the DAX what sort of move you could get. So yeah, that's that. Bit of a mistake there for me. Possibly was affected by the fact it was Friday. It's been a long week. I've done a fair degree of travelling as well this week, so maybe I wasn't at my sharpest mentally this morning, which could have something to do with it, but no point in making excuses. I made the decision and had to live with the consequences. So that's that. Well done to everyone that took that trade. Textbook DAX. It's exactly what we look for. So well done to everyone that let the edge play out. So yeah, that's that, guys. Thanks very much, and I'll chat to you soon.